I hope y'all are doing well today. Just a reminder to completely finish this Edpuzzle. If you do not fully finish the Edpuzzle, and I can check how much progress you went through, then I will not count your exit ticket for today. So make sure you fully finish this. It's a total of 3 problems, and it's going to help you a lot to finish that exit ticket. Only these 3 pages right here. That's it, and then we'll be done, okay? All right, so we're looking at lesson 3, which is on page 13. So go ahead and get your books out and go to page 13. Pause this Edpuzzle video while you're getting there. Okay, so today what we're going to be talking about is we are going to be talking about how to graph linear functions, which we should already pretty much know how to do. This isn't going to be too tough. It's just y equals mx plus b, where you graph this part first and then the slope after, right? You graph the y-intercept first and then you graph the slope after, which we already know that. However, what we are going to be doing today is we're going to be interpreting word problems to create this function. So we're going to be reading word problems to create the function and then graphing after that. So yesterday, all we did was we interpreted the word problems in order to find the function. Today, we're going to interpret the word problems, find a function, create a table, and then use that table to create a graph. So it's going to go word problem to function to table to graph. Okay, now there is going to be one problem where it goes word problem to coordinates to graph to table to function. But either way, as long as you know how to get from a word problem to a function or from a word problem to some coordinates, you will be able to get to where you need to go, okay? All right, so let's take a look at this first problem. A truck rental company charges a $150 rental fee, okay? Now, in addition to a charge of 50 cents per mile driven. So now what I want you to do is I want you to answer the multiple choice questions that are going to pop up on your screen, and then I want you to create a function of y equals mx plus b, except I want you to substitute in the slope for m and the y-intercept for b, okay? All right. Okay, so you should have answered those questions. Now, if you look here, you see this $150 rental fee. This $150 rental fee occurs once, which means that this is our B. So whenever you walk up into the U-Haul station and you ask for a U-Haul, they're going to charge you $150 to rent it. Then on top of that, they're going to charge you 50 cents per mile driven. Now you can drive this all the way across the country if you want to, but they're still going to charge you 50 cents per every mile. You could drive it just 1 mile and they're still going to charge you 50 cents for it. So this is our constant rate of change. It happens as many times as you need it to happen. And that is our m. So we have y equals 0.5x plus 150. And this is our function. Now what we're going to do is it wants us to ultimately create a graph from here. But I'm going to go ahead and make a table first so that we can have a super, super precise graph. Now, one of the ways that we can tell what x is equal to, even when it doesn't tell us what x is by looking at our graph. And we can see on our x-axis right here that it tells us that x is equal to miles. So we know that x is miles. The other thing that we know is that our y-axis is cost. So we know that y is cost. Now, I'm going to pick 3 points that I see here. I'm going to pick 0, I'm going to pick 500 and I'm going to pick 1,000. You could have chosen any 3 points that you wanted to, but that's going to help me to create the longest line possible. Okay, so that's why I chose those 3 values. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, here is 0, here is 500, and here is 1,000. Now, using your knowledge that this is X, so you can plug all of these values right here in for X, I want you to find what all of these 3 values are over here. And I'm going to ask you those questions on the Edpuzzle, so make sure you answer them. Okay, go ahead and go. All right, for this first one right here, we're going to have 0.5 times 0 plus 150. Now, anything times 0 is 0, so plus that 150 right there, our initial cost is going to be 150. Okay, that one was pretty easy. For the next one, we'll plug in 500. We'll have 0.5 times 500 plus 150, so that'll be 250 plus 150, which will be a total of $400. And then this one right here is 1,000. So we'll have 0.5 times 1,000, which is 500 plus 150, which is $650. Or you could have entered all of those values into your calculator. As long as you got to the right side of your table, all is well. All right, so we're going to graph all of those points. We have 0, 150. We have 500, 400. And we have 1,650. And then we'll just connect all 3 of those points. And that will be our line. Now, what this line is saying is that no matter what point, no matter what X value that you put in for this X, it's always going to fall on top of that line. It's not going to fall above, and it's not going to fall below. If you are using this function right here, all of your points will always fall onto this line. Okay? All right, so all of your points are always going to fall onto that line as long as you are using this function. Okay? Now, it wants to know if the truck is driven 0 miles, what is the cost to the customer? And we can see this in 2 different ways. We see that when the truck is driven 0 miles, it costs $150. We also see that here, and we also see that in our initial value right here. So those are our 3 ways that we could have identified that when the truck is driven 0 miles, the cost to the customer is $150. Okay, so driven 0 miles, the cost is $150. And this is shown on the graph as the y-intercept. Okay, remember, y-intercept occurs whenever x is equal to 0. Y-intercept is the y value whenever x is equal to 0. Now, what it wants to know is that what is the rate of change that relates the cost to the number of miles driven? So, what is the rate of change and what exactly does it represent? So, our rate of change is 50 cents. We know that from our function, we know that from our story, we know that it's 50 cents from all over, right? So what is the rate of change as it relates to the cost of miles driven? Now, we know that M is equal to change in Y over change in X. And we know that change in Y is cost. We see that because that's right there, that's on our Y-axis. And we know that change in X is miles. And we know that from right there. We see that on our x-axis. And we know that our cost is 50 cents per every mile. And we found that from our function right there. So what this is saying is for every mile driven, it costs 50 cents. And that's our meaning. All right, now it says we're going to skip C, and it says to write the linear equation, which we already have, y equals 0.5x plus 150. Okay, that's question number 1. Moving on to question number 2. Jenna bought a used car for $18,000. She is told that the value of the car is likely to decrease by $2,500 for each year that she owns the car. So I see another number right there, so I'm going to highlight it. Decrease by $2,500 for each year. Let the value of the car in dollars be V. I'm going to say that it's Y. And the number of the years that Jenna has owned the car be T. I'm going to say it's X. So I'm going to change all of these right here to X. Y. X. X, X, X. Okay, that's just to kind of keep it linear across the thing of if you see a value, it's X, and if you see a value, it's Y, so we don't get confused, okay? So go ahead and make those changes to your book. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to have you identify the initial value and the rate of change. So go ahead and identify those and enter those into Edpuzzle. And then after that, I want you to create a function of y equals mx plus b using that initial value and rate of change. All right. Okay, so you should have found that this was the initial value. It's only $18,000 once, okay? That only occurs once. And you should have found that this right here is the slope, because that decrease happens over and over and over again. So you should have known that y equals negative 2,500 x plus 18,000. Now, if I threw you for a loop with that negative in front of that 2,500, read the word decrease right here. Remember that when you see the word decrease, that means negative. And when you see the word increase, that means positive. So that's how I knew that right there. All right, now it says, what is the value of the car when x equals 0? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create another table. And I'm going to have x and y. All right, I'm going to fill in this with 0, 1, 2, and 7. All right, so it asks, what is the value of the car when x equals 0? So you're going to take this value right here, and you're going to plug it somewhere into that function, and then enter your answer into Edpuzzle. All right, you should have found that it is 18,000 because you plugged that 0 in right there for x. All right, find it for 1, 2, and 7 now and enter your answers into Edpuzzle. Okay, so you should have found these values right here. You would know this by plugging in a 1 for x, plugging in a 2 for x, and plugging in a 7 for x. And whatever you get out of that function right there is your y. Okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to graph those points. So we have this right here. We've got a point about right there. It's kind of hard to graph it. We've got a point at 1,300. And we have a point at 7,500, which is about right there. And then we're just going to connect all those points. There we go. All right, now it says find the value of the car when x equals 1. We did that right here. When x equals 2, we found that right there. And when, oh no, it deleted my line. And when x equals 7, we found that right there. And then we're supposed to plot all of those points. All right, what is the rate of change that relates y to x? Hint, is it positive or negative, and how can you tell? Okay, so the rate of change that relates y to x is negative 2,500. Now, we know that rate of change for this scenario right here is value of the car over number of years. And if you're confused on how we got that, number of the value of the car is on the y-axis, and this is change in y. And number of years is on the x-axis, and this is change in x, and that's how we got those two values. So we know that it's negative 2,500 over 1. So that means that every year the car is owned, the value decreases. By negative 2,500. All right. It says write a linear function. We know that ours is y equals negative 2,500 x plus 18,000. Okay. If you don't have any of that written, make sure you go ahead and have that written down. All right. All right, for the last one, it says an online bookseller has a new book in print. The company estimates that if a book is priced at $15, then 800 copies of the book will be sold per day. And if the book is priced $20, then the 550 copies of the book will be sold per day. All right, now if you remember way back in the beginning, we talked about how we were going to go word problem to function to table to graph, which we did, right? We did that with the first two problems. Then I told you that there was going to be one problem where we went word problem to coordinates to graph to table to function. So we're going to do that one right now. So we're taking a little bit of a turn. All right, so our first problem says to identify the ordered pairs in the problem. So I'm going to take a look right here because I see two numbers, and I know two numbers have to go in my ordered pair. And I'm going to look right here, and I'm going to see two numbers. And I know that two numbers have to go in my ordered pair. Okay, so I want you guys to create two ordered pairs from these two things. Two ordered pairs from these two things. All right, so one of your ordered pairs should have been 15, 800, and your other ordered pair should have been 20, 550. Now, it wants us to plot both of those on the graph. So we have the point 15, 800, and we have the point 2550. Sorry, that was a horrible one. All right, and we plotted both of those on that graph. All right, so it says assume that the number of relationships between the books sold and the price is linear, and to draw a line through that. We already did that. What is the rate of change related to the number of copies sold to price? Okay, so it wants to know the number of copies sold to price. Now, there's two ways that we can find that. The first way that we could find that is by putting this into a table. And we already know how to find rate of change from a table. This is personally my favorite way to find it because it's a little bit more precise and you can always put some numbers in a table and find what you need to find, right? So this is my favorite way to do it. I have X and I've got Y. 15, 20, 800, 550. Now to get from 800 to 550, you got to go down 250. And to get from 15 to 20, you have to go up by 5. So our rate of change is what from this table? Go ahead and type that into Edpuzzle. All right, so you should have found that your rate of change from the table was negative 250 over 5, which is negative $50, or negative 50 copies per every dollar. Because remember, this is Y and this is X. So this is copies and this is price. All right, the other way that you could have found it is you could have found it by using 2 points on the graph. So there's one here and we know there's one there. So we have to go down, and this goes down 50 to get from 800 to 750. And it goes to the right from 15 to 16, which is 1, which means that our rate of change is negative 50 over 1, which means it's negative $50. Negative 50 copies for every dollar. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? That means, that's a dollar sign. That means for every dollar the company makes the book more expensive. The number of copies sold drops by 50. Because remember, this is negative, so that's dropping. So for every single dollar that the company makes the book more expensive, the number of copies sold drops by 50. All right, so based on the graph, if the company prices the book at $18, how many copies can they expect to sell per day? So we can just draw a line, and we can figure that out. So that'd be 650 copies. And then the company wants to know, in order to sell 700 copies of the book per day, what should they sell the book at? So we're going to go over here to 700, and we're going to see what they priced that book at. And they priced that book at $17. All right. Now you are done with that. You don't need to do the problem set unless you want to get some extra practice. And you are going to go do your exit ticket. Once you are done with your exit ticket, you will make up any missing work that you have. Otherwise, you will put into study hall for next week. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go do your exit ticket. And then you're going to go do any makeup exit tickets that you need to make up. I know a lot of y'all didn't get 6-1 turned in, so go get 6-1 turned in. Then there are some other assignments for you to do on the board. So if you don't have those done, go get those done now, okay? All right, I hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching and paying attention to this.